I was listening to the Ritual podcast, and he had Dean Ornish on there, and I highly recommend people going on there and watching Dean speak because he is one of the forefathers of the plant-based movement and has done a lot of research for it. And it was interesting because Dean said in the interview that he's done fighting. He's been fighting for 40 years with people. He has evidence proving that his diet works. I don't know if you know this, but Dean Ornish has set up programs all across the country with heart health. We have here at Asheville a Ornish program for cardiac rehabilitation, and he's got lots of evidence that it works. It's worked for 40 years, and he used to debate Atkins all the time, and he said he's just tired of doing the fighting because people keep coming up with research that is flawed. There is absolutely zero evidence of these high protein, low carb diets doing anything to reverse disease, whereas we have tons of good studies showing reversal of disease with plant-based diets. And I feel what he's saying there because I'm getting tired of fighting. Every time I come up with a rebuttal of something that's out there, a new paper comes out. Like there was another paper that was just released recently. I can't believe the ridiculousness of it. They basically got together three groups of people, a vegetarian group, a omnivore group, and a vegan group. They didn't study these people prospectively. They did what's called a cross-sectional study where they basically said, what do you eat? And then they did measurements on them. So this is basically crazy because they actually didn't even go into what the vegans are eating. They know what the vegans aren't eating. They're not eating meat, but they don't know what they're eating in their diet. They could have sampled just a bunch of unhealthy vegans and missed out on healthy vegans. The vegan group had less muscle. So their conclusion is that vegans in general have less muscle. How can you do that with just a few people? You can't have a small n number of people that are randomly chosen and come up with an idea of what muscle mass is, especially when you don't know what these people are eating. Now, it turns out the vegans had a higher homocysteine level. You get a high homocysteine level when you don't supplement with B12. We've seen in several studies, especially in the EPIC studies, that if you don't supplement with B12, you could tend to have other problems. And we've noticed in ethical vegans that don't seem to be as concerned about their health. They tend not to supplement as much, and they do get B12 deficiencies and other diseases. And when you look at their diet, it's a really crappy diet with really low fiber. It's not a whole food plant-based diet, which is what Dr. Ornish and myself and the other doctors are recommending. And it's not what the healthy vegans that I see at all these veg fests that are running fast and growing muscle are eating. They're eating a complex whole food diet, which is very, very different than a junk food vegan diet. I don't know why we can't seem to get this point across, and doing some terrible cross-sectional low-end study doesn't give you any conclusions on the health of a whole food plant-based diet. But the meat industry is desperate. The dairy industry is desperate because veganism is growing very, very quickly. And so they're coming up with any kind of junk study they can. They did the same thing with smoking. If they could somehow create and instill any kind of doubt, they'll get people to still buy their products. And hopefully that doesn't work. I'm very soon going to stop doing all this fighting because I know what diet works. I see it on a day-to-day basis in my patients, and I see it in the literature with the real good science, with the large N studies, with the mechanism of action studies, with the randomized controlled trials, with the very good epidemiologic studies. I know what works, and constantly fighting with these ridiculous articles can really be frustrating, which is why you don't see people like Dr. Greger and Dr. McDougall doing that anymore, because they just want to go out there and just tell the truth the way they've seen it in the literature. And I'm getting pretty close to doing that, but I'm also a easily ticked off guy because I see so many people every day that are sick because of the poor information out there. So I'll probably keep fighting for a while, but the bottom line is one single study that gets printed in PubMed is not how we decide science. We decide science through studies that are replicated in many different places. I like to look at epidemiology and then look at mechanism of action and then look at randomized controlled trials and have that all tie together. So one just random study out of nowhere is not good science, and you can't make any conclusions from that.